Okay, so where was I? Oh, I was in the factory that I was working at when the earthquake actually hit, and when it first started, it was just a little bumpy, but that wasn't unusual because there's usually an earthquake there about once a week, very small one like that. And I kind of, in fact, they usually ignore it. Sometimes I have lessons with one-on-one lessons with managers of the company, and like I'll be in the middle of a lesson with them, and I stop because there's an earthquake, and he's just kind of going about his business, writing something down, just completely ignoring it, spacing out, whatever. Um, but during this lesson, I tried to do the same thing. We were in the middle of an exercise, and I was like, "Huh, earthquake," making a small joke, and then after about 5 seconds, the student just dove under his desk. He just went right under his desk, and I was like, "Huh." And when I found out later, I tried to sit down for I was sitting in my seat for a few more seconds, maybe 30 seconds. I'm like, it's not going away. It's I think it's actually getting yes, it's getting worse. And then the walls, and this is a factory. The walls were actually they're made out of like these steel plates, which are like intertwined, and the walls started moving back and forth and up and down. And I'm like, okay, now it's time to dive under the desk and join the student. And turns out that the student I was with had actually been in the Kobe earthquake 25 years ago,
Yes, yes.
which was like the biggest earthquake in Japan up
Yeah,
until now. And
before this, yes.
yeah, and he was in elementary school when it happened, and a bunch of his friends died, and yeah, so it was probably a good thing to be with him at that time and have him dive under the desk, and take his cue. After
How long did it take?
Well, we were under the desk for maybe 10, 15 minutes. I don't really know for the first biggest part of the quake. And we both like we're on our cell phones, we're looking up on the internet, what the hell is going on? How big is this earthquake? What do we do? And
All the furnitures were moving, and
yeah, the furniture's moving. I had a whiteboard behind me which I was writing on, and that like fell down onto the desk, uh, and stuff. So yeah, and it started to die down a little bit, and so the student stood up and tried to like get his things so he could get out of the building. As soon as he stood up, it just got way worse, and it started shaking even more. He dove back under the desk, and I'm like, "Don't stand up! Don't freaking stand up! If you stand up, it makes the earthquake worse." So we stood there, and for maybe another 5-10 minutes, it started to calm down a little bit, enough for people that came into the room. They're like, "Oh, you guys got to get out of here! Let's get out of the building!" So we ran out of the building, and then we stood outside of the building for about an hour while just it finally died down, and just into smaller aftershocks until they declared, I guess, it was okay to enter the building, grab whatever stuff you needed, and head home and get away.
were there any serious damages in the building?
The building itself was actually 60 years old, so it's really impressive that no, there wasn't any major damage. Structurally, as far as I know, the biggest damage was in the lobby. There was a bunch of like marble facade type looking things to make it look like a really nice fancy lobby, and the marble kind of like cracked and fell off. But underneath, where people actually work in the labs and things like that, it was everything seemed fine. There were some broken lights, but other than that, most things were intact. But all of the everyone was fine. All of the electricity in the entire city went out at that time, and it was stayed out for the next 2 or 3 days. But the biggest concern at that point, they're like, okay, everyone go home, but get away from here because a tsunami is coming. Anytime there's an earthquake, there's going to be a tsunami. And
And how far was it from the ocean?
it's right next to the ocean. It's very similar to It's very similar to my place. My place is right next to the ocean too. However, at my place, there's a good 30 foot or like a seven meter drop. There's like a cliff, or
7 meters, not that high. If a
seven
tsunami is
seven
coming.
7 kilometers. No, 30 feet.
No, no.
Am I wrong?
Yeah,
Hold on.
7 meters it might be, but yeah, I wouldn't feel safe
Well,
because of
how
that.
how high was the tsunami?
How high
How
was it?
how
I
was
don't
the What
10,
was?
10,
Okay,
15
okay. So
meters.
whatever higher than that. Okay,
Okay.
I need to do some math then. Uh, I thought I made it towards 30, 30 sorry. Okay,
Just, so
divide by
was it 30 feet?
30 feet.
Uh, it's about 10 meters.
10 meters.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. So 10 meters. My place is a good 10 meter cliff before the ocean, and then also I'm up on the hill a little bit more. So in my area, when the tsunami came, it didn't even affect it. Didn't even come up above the cliff. But closer to the factory, which is further up the road, it's at about 20 feet. So some of the tsunami actually did come up over the cliff and made it onto the road there, but luckily never actually crossed the road, and there was no major damage. There was something like the railing on the side of the road had some damage, but other than that, it was fine. So I ran home, got my
Did you meet Yuka?
Yuka lives in she lives in Tokyo. I don't live in Tokyo.
Yeah, I know, but did you meet her?
No, I haven't met her today.
Okay.
But so I ran home to my place in Ibaraki, and I grabbed whatever I could. Now I'm sitting there thinking, what the hell am I supposed to do? I know, and the funny thing is, when I moved to this town, there's these signs all over the place that say evacuation area and how to get there. And I always ignored them. I was like, evacuation area, I'll never have to go there. And then I'm thinking as I get to my apartment, like, where the hell is the evacuation area? I know there's a shelter or something, and I've seen the sign 1,000 times. How do I get there? So, and then I started getting all these text messages from friends in Japan. They're like, you got to get the hell out of there. You got to go to a shelter or something because there's a tsunami coming. Along with how are you? But I couldn't respond to any of them because by that time my phone had lost connection.
Fuck.
So I went to the closest train station. I'm like, there's got to be other people that are gonna run to this train station too to see what's going on. And by that time it was about 6 or 7 at night, and the entire city was pitch black because the sun had gone down and there's no electricity. So got to the station, and of course the trains aren't running, and an announcement goes off on some loudspeakers about there's no electricity, find shelter. And so I went to the police box, which
Were
was
you all by yourself?
yeah, I was all by myself. But there was some other like businessmen who were at a meeting or something, and then they got to the station at the same time. They're like, oh yeah, train's not running. That makes sense. So what do we do now? We all went to the police box and asked, where's the shelter and stuff. And the businessmen were like, where's a business hotel around here? I don't want to go to the shelter. I'm thinking, there's no way, there's no electricity. You think that the hotel's going to be open? Maybe in Tokyo. Maybe they have a backup generator, but not in this town. But so, anyways, they left, and I asked the cop, how do I get to the thing? He's like, oh, it's over here, and it gives me directions. So I go there, and made it to the shelter just fine. But there was no electricity, and it was packed with a bunch of people. It was a gymnasium of an elementary school.
How
And
many people were there?
I'm really
Hundreds or thousands?
not thousands, no, but maybe 200, 300. I'm really bad at counting, especially in a situation like that. But at that time, I was kind of last to the party by the time I got there. So there was no blankets or anything to hand out, and so I just there was a little balcony above. Like kind of like a second story. You climb some stairs above the gymnasium. I kind of walked up there and found my own little corner and just kind of huddled against the wall and hoped that I wouldn't freeze to death. It wasn't cold enough to freeze to death or get hypothermia or anything, but it was made out of concrete, and concrete is actually not the best conductor of heat.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
quite cold. So I got 2 hours of sleep on and off, and then next day started, and
Was there any earthquake during the night?
there was earthquakes, aftershocks throughout the night, but they weren't anything like the first one. They were small, and
But how were the people?
everyone was
calm, or?
completely calm. That's the amazing thing about the Japanese in this throughout this whole time. There's never been any panicking whatsoever.
That's cool.
And even on the second day, I went out, and there's no electricity in the whole city. they said it was safe to go out and get supplies from your home or whatever, bring them back. So I did, and I went out, and the everything was closed because there's no electricity. All of the vending machines aren't working, but the local grocery store was selling ramen and things like that, and like family packs of stuff that wouldn't go bad, and they were portioning them out to people, and there was like a 2 hour line just to wait for that. And curiously enough, there was also a donut shop open, uh, which had like a 15-minute line. So of course I went to the donut shop and and I got some donuts.
Yeah.
But apparently the donut shop, they make things like a day ahead, and they had finished making all their donuts for the next day before the earthquake, and I guess they when they sell out, they sell out. So I was lucky enough to get some donuts.
Cool. Saved your life.
It saved my life, those donuts. Earthquake-proof, radiation-proof donuts. Mm. And then I went home and grabbed the sleeping bag and some other things to keep myself warm, and got back to the shelter.
Was it on Saturday, right?
That was Saturday. That was Saturday morning here in Japan. Friday for most of the world. Although Saturday, really early morning there,
Yes.
or Friday evening, and my cell phone still wasn't working, so I went to the payphones were working, the public payphones, but they were free because there's no normal electricity to check how much money you put in, I guess. So free phones as long as you put something in there. And I tried calling a bunch of people, couldn't get a hold of anyone. Not Yuka, not my family. So I called a friend of mine who I know has really good cell phone service, and he actually he was in Sendai when it happened. That's like the northern part. That's where the tsunami hit, and it just got really destroyed, and he was safe. He lives in Tokyo, and he just happened to be in Sendai when it happened, and I was like, oh my god, you're in Sendai. Are you okay? It's like, yeah, I'm fine. Where are you okay? I heard the earthquake was terrible there. I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. That's really strange circumstances, and I asked him to email Yuka and tell her that I was okay and that I'm in a shelter and stuff, and got that taken care of. But for these public phones, they ended up having like a good half hour, 1 hour line in front of them as well, and so everyone's lining up, but no one's freaking out, no one's stealing or robbing or pillaging. It's a cultural thing.
Yeah, that's it would have been other way around in Hungary, I think.
Oh yeah, in Hungary they'd be bringing out the tanks again.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. And the next day, we can skip to the next day. Although I did like, even though I brought my own sleeping bag and stuff, they finally got some more blankets. And I got one of those rescue blankets that you always see in the you see in Hollywood movies and dramas, or after the victim something happens to them, they put the blanket over them. And I always wanted that to happen to me, but so I got one of those blankets. But I had to return it, because it was for relief stuff. So I didn't want to steal the relief blanket.
You just wanted to try them, yeah.
I just wanted to try it out and stay warm. But the second day in the shelter, and the people at the shelter were totally cool and helping us out, and they were supplying food and water to everyone, and public toilets as well, which was useful. Second day, about halfway through, I went back and got even more stuff and came back, and I thought I might even have to work the next day because no one can contact my company. I couldn't contact my company, and nobody knows what the situation was at the factory. So I dressed up in a suit as usual and went back to the thing. Was planning on sleeping, but then I heard someone talking on the phone. They're like, "Yeah, it sounds like the electricity just came back on." I was like, "Oh." And it was about 5 o'clock at night, and so I went back home. Electricity wasn't. I'm like, okay, screw that. No more shelter. I'm coming back, and I'm using heating, and I'll just stick it out here. And then that's around that time my cell phone came back on, and I was able to call my family, and everything was safe. But still, there was no running water, so I went. But because the electricity came back on, we could start using vending machines again. So I went and robbed. I didn't rob. I put about $20 into the vending machine and just took as much as possible. Just to get through whatever could happen. So that's the main story of what happened
And when have you heard about the nuclear plants?
Yeah, the nuclear plants. But that's I'm gonna end this other video that I'm taking of my story now.